Let everybody get settled. All right, thank you. Welcome to Puget Sound Garden Railway's 2023 clinics. It's like we got a good showing. We got 7 presentations for you today. We're going to start with Norm and making curved turnouts.
Okay. Where are we here? Oh, why a curved turnout? Well, you have to make curves, I guess. But I've got a layout that's got a pond, you can see, and it's got 2 tracks that go, 2 loops that go around it. The bottom line is, though, they join together at this trestle. So, you know, each is a loop. If you want to run 2 trains, one on each loop, you have to worry about switching as you go across that trestle because it's just a single track there. So what I wanted to do was be able to run 2 independent loops. So to do that, I had to basically take and move that, put another piece going across where the trestle is, basically another bridge, and make 2 independent loops, but yet I want to be able to switch from one loop to the other. So the solution was to add more track, a couple of curved, it requires a couple of curved turnouts, and I couldn't find any curved turnouts that would match my existing curvatures up there. So what do? Well, I guess you have to take and make your own, I guess. Next. So what I did is figured out about where I wanted the roadbed to go, or the track to go, and it went along. What I have to do is bring one loop, go along and make another basically bridge next to the trestle, and to come across I can have 2 independent loops there, but I still have to be able to switch from one loop to the other. So to start, I took a single rail, used that and made it follow the outside rail coming down from up above down to where the trestle is. And so I matched the curvature of that, use a rail bender, and then I took another long piece of rail and set that off to go towards where I wanted the new track to go on the outside rail. And then I just took additional rails in between and followed. One additional rail would follow the existing track, and the other inside rail would follow the new track. So, and then I use the shorter rails to match where the other rails went. And I have, this is going to be about a number 5 turnout, so I've got a number 5 track frog. There we go, look at there, number 5, put a number 5. So this was the first rail this was a new rail that went off where I wanted it to go. I had the other single rail follow this existing track rail right here. Then I took 2 other pieces, shorter rail, and put one shorter one in here, and then the other shorter one following here where the frog would go right there. Okay, next. So when I did that, I then used some not joiners, but track templates, and built what I call a skeleton layout, or a skeleton curve. And you use that skeleton curve with a magic marker, laid it on the piece of cardboard, which is I've got up there, and mark where my frog would go in here and where my points would be. And made sure I had I tried to match. Took this up, laid it back down on the existing trail or track, because this is where the existing track is. This would be where the new track is going out. And make sure that everything kind of matched up. Put lots of tape down, lots of rail gauges. You can see the rail gauges here. I've got a couple of rail gauges on the table there for you to look at. Okay, next. And then with that skeleton together, I've got some forms which I got over there, which I've used on previous ones where I've got, these are for where the ties would go in. You can see right here I got some ties on one of the forms, rails go right here. Grooves are cut in there, which are the width of the ties. And then I got holes, I drilled holes underneath where the ties would go. That's because when you spike rail down the bottom of where the spike goes through about a 1/4 inch below the tie, and if you didn't have these holes down here, you'd just be basically nailing into the form, and then you couldn't pull a tie out, or it would be very hard to pull a tie out without bending stuff. So anyway, that's why the holes are there. And you can see here different lengths of ties. Here's a couple of rail gauges to make sure that you keep the width, the distance between the tracks correct. And then I start at the end where the single track is, because on a turnout you have a single track coming through here, and then the other track will go off this way. So you start here on the single track end, and you go 2 or 3 ties. Then you have to put in a couple long ties where you're going to put your switch motor, and I happen to use air switches, but that's what the 2 long ties would be. Then you just continue right on up. Okay, next. And you can see here, where I'm starting to, the points are down here at this end. This is where the original rail would be, has to match up with the original track. This is where the new track is going to be switched off and go around the curve. And you can see I use lots of gauges here to make sure you maintain the spacing between the tracks. And I use those forms to put down the ties, and then start spiking from this end right here and start working this way up. When you come down towards the, it doesn't show it here, but there'll be a picture later. When you spike to spike it down, you put spikes on either side of the rail, and I put one spike basically here, and then on the other side of the rail it's over here. And you space them apart, because when they come through on the other side, you want to make sure that they're spread apart far enough so you can take a nail set and bend them over later. Okay, let's go to the next one. Here's where the frog is, and I use a commercial frog and it's commercial points also. It's a number 5 frog right here is what I use. Then I use slider joiners. These are just joiners that you just slide the rail into to attach the rail on either side. You build the guardrails. You cut the flange on the end of each of the guardrails so you can bend it over easily. And you just spike the guardrails down. Basically, there's a width of the spike in between the guardrail and the actual rail. And that should be enough room to allow your wheel to pass through on either side. If not, you're going to have to move the guardrail over just a little bit. Next. This is the switch motor. This is my air switch motor right here. So to move the points, you use the air switch. Now here is the points. Come down here and right here. So when you put down the points, you have to make sure that one side of the points, when the one side of the point is up against the rail, the other side has enough room for the wheel to go through and continue on straight through. And it's real critical that the spacing, track gauge between at this point in time matches. You have your track here and your track here, that this has to be the same gauge all the way through. And the way to do that is what I did. There's other ways to do it, but I took and I filed this side of the rail down the flange and even part of the head down, and just gradually less and less as you went up that way. That's so when this point goes up against the rail, like on this side, it's the width of the rail. Basically, you can maintain the spacing in between, whether regardless of which side the points are switched to. So you have this. So I have to basically file it down almost halfway. So when the point is over here, it makes a nice single rail. And when they're switched the other way, you have the opening that goes across through there. And this is just a piece of aluminum. And the commercial points have a hole on one side of the flange on either one. And they use that hole to just drill through and spacing on this piece of aluminum. And then on to connect up to the air switch, there's a hole here which is kind of like a Z step right here to attach the link to the piece of plate right here. The critical thing is this filing of the rail. Now there's other ways of doing it I've seen where they take and just kind of cut the flange and they put a kink in the outside rail and bend it over to maintain the spacing. So there's probably a couple of different ways you could do that. They use a real small bolt, like about a number 0 nut and bolt to put the or the point onto the bar right here. And along this side, because you've filed off the inside of the track, the flange, along through here, to spike the track down to the tie, what I did is I drilled a hole in the flange on the outside, and all the places where I've had it filed down, and just so there's a single hole in the flange, so there's just a single spike that goes through the flange into the tie, right along there. Okay, next. So, real quick, it was easy to finish it off. I just spiked all the ties down. You can see right here this is the new bridge running parallel to the old trestle. This is the new switch right in here. See, before you'd come down through here and you'd have to follow this and come on to this other loop. This was one of the loops, this is the other loop. So now I can come down and turn the switch, and now I can go to this parallel piece right here. And now I can run 2 independent loops, yet if I want to go from this loop to this loop, all I have to do is just turn the switch here, and I go from one side to the other. And I did this on this end up here, and then there same one on this side over here. So you kind of just cut into the existing track, use slip joiners, use a temporary bridge, built a hard road bed with gravel, Trex, and just laid in the new track right there. And connect up because it's air switches, I got my air switches right here, the master panel, and then just run air wire or lines out from there out to each of the switches. And when you build the switches, you should, in my case, for air off, in other words, where there's no air on the switch, the switches are set so they'll come through and go make each loop independent. It's only when I put air on can I switch from one to the other. So when you build a curved turnout and put your switches in, or your switch motor in, you want to make sure that the side like in my case, if you don't have air on, you want the track to go with the way that we'd rather have it go. So other than that, next. So bottom line, both switches worked well. Use a rail bender, and I've got a rail bender on the table there, so you can see what that is in case you don't know what one is. I made a skeleton turnout and used that as a template to finish it off, and I kept going from the skeleton turnout, and then after I do 3 or 4 ties, I'd lift that up and go take it back outside and lay it down to make sure that the curvature of the original track is being matched by the curvature on the turnout. And I kind of emphasize this more. Lots of track gauges to keep your proper rail spacing. When you start spiking things down, you better have lots of gauges on there to make sure all those rails are at the right spacing. Otherwise, you're going to be having derail problems. The other thing I found out, I put the frog in, and I put it in backwards. And for a while, when I ran a car through there, couldn't figure out what the heck was going on. It was derailing. Looked at it closer, oh yeah, I put it in backwards. So you make sure you get your frog going in the right way. You got to pre-drill all your ties for the spikes. Otherwise, the ties are just too hard, too tough to drive a spike in. So I pre-drill them with a diameter that's just a little bit smaller than what the diameter of the spike is. And that allows you to take and drive the spikes in real easy. And then I developed a spike bending tool, because after you get this, the rail spiked down to the ties, there's about a 1/4 inch of spike coming out the bottom. And you have to bend those bottom pieces over. So I developed a tool, and it's just 2 pieces of metal with a spacer in between right here. And your head of the rail it will drop in here, and then it's close enough such that when the head of the spike will rest on either side of these pieces of that spaced apart, and you just take a nail set and then just bend it over. And it might be kind of hard to see, but this is a tool in the vise, and this is a track right here, and this is a spike ready to be bent over. So you need something like this to easily bend over the spikes on the bottom of your ties. Okay? I know that was kind of quick and dirty, so to speak, but I don't know, there's not too much else to talk about on it. I've got the track gauges here. This is a form that I use for spacing the ties, and use this for spiking everything down. This is my track gauge, or my spike bending tool. This goes in the vise, and the track, it just goes in that, head of the track goes in that slot, and then you just, the heads of the spike will just rest on the edge of this here, and you can bend it over. Single rail, tool bending, commercial frog, and commercial, excuse me, points. And there's the my template that I always used and went back to. Okay.
Can you tell me where you get your commercial frogs and plants?
Logis.
Creek.
Yeah,
Logis Creek.
but that was 15 years ago. I just bought a whole bunch.
They're still available.
They're still available?
Yeah. You might have to wait for it.
Yeah, it's a lot easier than making your own. Track gauges, I made a whole bunch of myself. Got a couple of dozen of these things. Because I've got a little milling machine that I can make track gauges pretty easily with.
You'll rent them out, right, Norm?
What?
You'll rent them out?
I rent them out. Well,
This one in
maybe.
the back.
This is like I said, this is the form, and you can see where I just put in some different size spikes. Ties in there, and spiked down a couple of sections of track.
One
So
in
you
the
can see
back.
how that's done.
Way in the back.
What's the manufacturer's brand name of your air switch, and where might you get that?
I think mine they're old also, but I think you can now get them from Sunset Valley, if I remember right. And I think, and that's where I got my spikes from also, incidentally.
Yeah.
But, I'm sorry?
Sunset Valley's out of stock on
Oh, they're out of stock, but you can get them.
that. Change problems and all that.
Yeah.
Okay, gotta get going.
Thanks, Norm.
All right, thanks, Norm. Okay, Mark Howe has a presentation on flaming LED lights.